third coffee now, right?
It's only my fifth coffee today.
Get started. Okay, and the clock strikes 12. We can get started. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Kriyadocs Industry Breakout session this morning. We have a very esteemed panel of speakers here with us, and I can tell you with full confidence that you chose very wisely to come to this particular session. All right, so let's get started. What we are here to talk about is agility in publishing and making a case for embracing change. We have some fabulous speakers with us here today. David Haber from the Association for the American Society of Microbiology. And we have Gill Flynn from the BMJ.
Hi.
And we have Bryan Hibbard from the Society of Petroleum Engineers. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We also have Adrian Stanley and Richard of JMIR Publications, who have joined us through pre-recorded sessions, and they couldn't be here in person today, but they've sent their comments through pre-recorded sessions. And JMIR Publications is a digital born open access publication based out of Canada. We want this to be a very interactive session, so feel free to ask questions and share your comments with the panelists here as we walk through the various aspects of the journey towards agility. I think we've handed out a packet on it. Inside it, you have a worksheet is there. So open the worksheet. You can make notes throughout the session as we follow through with the various questions over here. It's so good to be back in a physical conference, isn't it? I think it's very cliched by now if you start talking about the pandemic. I think all of us have even forgotten what life was like behind a mask. We don't know what it means. But I think the one thing that the pandemic kind of taught us was that things could change overnight in a pretty drastic manner. And I think the one thing that we learned with the couple of years of COVID that we all went through is that what we took for granted yesterday is not going to be the same tomorrow. And in publishing as well, I think we can kind of translate that and see it's about time that we look at what are some of the changes that we foresee coming towards us in the publishing industry. So I'd like to throw open this question to our panelists and say, hey, what do you see as those big changes that are coming down the road for the publishing industry? Can we start with you, David?
Sure. One of the big changes I see is the shift from a journal-focused container of things to an author-centered experience to get their material published. And that's a big shift because of the different constituents that play into what it takes to make a journal and the different concerns an author may have and how centering that author is a different kind of activity from a publisher perspective.
And I would agree with that. I do think that there will be a change from the journal sort of way of thinking to publishing, to getting content out there. You don't type in a URL, you start searching. I would also say that the format, we've been talking this morning about PDFs, and within systems that drives us mad. So I think the format, and even on Sowmya's presentation, you'll see animated GIFs. So I think there's going to be a huge change to just from a research article through to all the multimedia animated GIFs, videos, and even not just publishing it in a journal, but presenting it at conferences. So I think format is going to be a big change coming up.
It's pronounced GIF. Just kidding. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Another big area I see that we've all been dealing with is artificial intelligence. I remember looking at ChatGPT as this cool little new tool. I wonder what's going to happen with it. Kind of end of last year, and then it wasn't very long before it was very obvious this was going to change a lot of society. Well, where we are now with AI, it's getting better. It's still a problem. I'm still deeply concerned with the fact that ChatGPT is very good at telling compelling lies. But I think we're going to a point where AI is going to be able to do a lot more for us and allow us to be more efficient, and is going to do a lot of the collaboration, putting things together that we struggle to build systems for.
All right. Thank you. Is that one not working? Okay, no problem. Yeah, so that's kind of where I see changes.
Bryan, the one thing that doesn't change is Mike's not working at a conference, I think.
There you're right. There you go. Still dealing with that.
Just on ChatGPT, it's I think what will change will be veracity. You know, being able to authenticate, because ChatGPT can come up with, it can pull all the data it's been given and tell you, well, what that data is telling. But is it true, or is it fake news in the common parlance?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of things coming at the scholarly publishing, like you guys mentioned. Certainly AI, something that we all need to watch out for. What it can do, what it cannot do is something yet to be proven, but certainly something to watch out for and look at it. Moving to a more author-centric sort of a viewpoint, open access. There's a lot of changes coming down the pipeline for sure. And I think we posed the same question to Adrian, and I'd like to share his comments here as well. So that's another thing I can count on. Things aren't working. Excuse me, the audio isn't working. Sorry about that, just give us a second.
Additional multimedia will be audio as well. That's another thing that I think is going to, in the future.
Why are we not playing this? Okay, definitely got audio there. Well, that's the audio sound we want.
The publishing industry and scholarly communications industry is in a huge amount of flux and change and transition. There's large movements towards more open access, publishing funder mandates, research integrity and ethics are all areas where publishers need to be able to come together, share data. There are great initiatives like the OA Switchboard where sort of metadata is passed from institution to funder to publisher and back. And all these things just need to streamline the processes in which publishers work in many ways to help support the author. But it's really important to think of the research, why the research needs to be published quickly, accurately, with quality. If you take the COVID example, many research papers at JMR, we published over 1,000 papers relating to COVID research. and tried to publish those both in a fast track open way. Everything we do is open access, but with quality reviews. So integrated systems that talk to each other, share data, and they're really easy to use for the operators, the authors, the editors, peer reviewers are all super important. So from that aspect, that's why those are some of the changes, but also why it's important to be prepared for these changes, and why the sort of thought or concept around agile publishing is important.
So, VUCA is a term that is commonly used when you talk about agility in software. I don't know how many of you here have heard this terminology, but the world that we live in right now is, you can say it's volatile. There's a lot of uncertainty in it. There's a lot of complexity in it, and there's a lot of ambiguity in it. And I think that sort of is true for publishing as well. And while this emerged as a concept for the software industry, which a lot of people talk about the VUCA world, I think you can take that same concept and say that's true for publishing, because we are at a point in time where we don't know what to expect. We don't know which direction the industry is going to go, and there's a lot of changes that we need to keep up with. Just to kind of like set the context, because we are talking about agility, and agility as a concept emerged from within software industry and from where where it emerged and kind of matured. I just wanted to provide a little bit of context into agility as a concept. So the history behind talking about agile software development actually started about 20 years ago, when a group of people came together and said, hey, there is a better way to create software, right? And the key concepts there were, they talked about the 4 values of agile, which is emphasizing people, emphasizing collaboration, adaptability, releasing software quickly, and then the 12 principles of agile. And I think there's a lot of takeaway for not just the software industry, but for all industries that has to deal with business agility. So there's a lot of takeaway for that from us. So if you looked at how software used to be created, which is a very waterfall way of thinking, which is you come up with the entire spec right at the beginning. The requirements, huge requirements documents would be written, very similar to the style guides, the big style guides that we were talking about in the breakfast earlier. But huge documents that would be written out and then handed over to the developer to go and develop as per the specs that were written out. And by now, it's already like 3-4 months since the first version of the requirements document came out. Then you go into a testing. Then and by the time the software actually came out, the user has already moved on, right? So this is how software used to be created. But now, with the whole move to agile, there's a lot of shorter feedback cycles, more iterative development. Quickly, a change is made and it is put in front of the user to get the feedback, and you're able to quickly course correct. So I think, if you look at what we could take away from learning from the software industry, I think a lot of things could be taken into publishing as well. I'm just throwing open here, these are the 4 values of agile as it is stated in the Agile Manifesto. Again, as you can see here, it's not really specific to software as such. These are just the cultural ways in which you work in order to deal with change, in order to get better prepared for dealing with change. And I think it starts with being open to change, right? Here are the 12 principles of agile. Again, I'm not expecting you to read all this. It's a lot to take in, but it's just more to tell you all that this is something that you could look up and see what are the 12 principles of agile. And the key thing is, again, as you go back and look at it, it's a lot around the human elements of dealing with change. It's not about the way of working. It's about a mindset. It's about creating that sort of safe environment where it's okay to deal with change. It's okay to do these short iterations. It's okay to deal with sometimes when things don't go according to plan. How do you learn from it and come back and put that together? So there's a lot of very interesting takeaways that could be applied to the publishing industry as well from the software industry. And why should we look at this? Because there's been a lot of really amazing success stories in the software, right? I mean, you've seen tech companies grow in such a rapid manner. Examples like Spotify, Amazon, Salesforce, that have all benefited from being very close to the end user by making quick changes, making iterative changes, and continuously bringing value back to the end user. And so I think I just wanted to take a little bit of time and kind of explain where this concept of agility actually comes from, and where it originated, and how we could take some of these concepts and apply it back into the publishing industry. So, back to you guys. As a publisher, what do you think are the 3 areas, or these have been like, 3 main things top of your mind that you feel like we ought to change, or that could benefit from change? Why don't we start from the other direction? Bryan, what do you think?
Okay. Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that can help with change is having greater collaboration between all of the people in my department, getting people on board with the changes that need to be made. One thing we found is we wanted to change our production, and so I had to get my higher ups on board of, why does that matter? How is it going to change things? And some of it had to do with making our members happy, so making our authors happy, but also changing the bottom line. And so that's really what's been important for us.
And for us as well, not copying you, but it's a collaboration, but also from a system point of view. So we talk about AX, the author experience, and I'd expand that out to just writing UX, user experience, all the funders, authors, readers, researchers, reviewers. So RX for the reviewer experience, and actually FX, coined again this morning for funder experience. But it's collaboration, and at the moment, certainly within my organisation, there's an awful lot of email upload, download, wrong format, only this format. That's what I think is going to need to change. So it's collaboration, but as you said, Sowmya, it's about the user, it's about the human experience. It's got to be intuitive and easier, much, much easier, I think.
Yeah. And David?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. It comes down to human experience, and in my mind, one spot that is sort of desperate for that is, from a publisher perspective, submission, right? Because that's where everything starts. And if you have all these systems that do not talk well, and you are basically repurposing all the data over and over and over again throughout your process, you kind of end up, one, with multiple systems doing the same thing, and it's an impediment to this kind of mindset, because there's no way to remove the connections between these systems in a clear way. You can't think simply anymore, because you have this system that has a requirement, you have this system that has a requirement. So the easiest solution is just to do everything over again, and that is far from efficient. So in my mind, one spot is submission that I'm sort of focusing on at this point, but.
Yeah, thanks. And I think in the worksheet that I've handed out, feel free to write out what are the 3 areas that you think you can benefit from change as well. But whoever said change is easy? Change isn't easy. It's not at all easy to change what you were doing. It requires a lot of effort, which is the reason why we're doing this panel discussion to begin with, because it isn't easy. You can imagine the changes that you want, but actually put it in action requires a little bit of effort. Is the publishing industry slow to accept change? Raise of hands, how many people think that we are slow to accept change? Okay, that's a lot of hands that just went up. I'm going to skip this video because I think we're running a little short. But I think we polled, on Hoover and asked the audience, and I think it's kind of split. It's actually encouraging right? Because pretty much 50% think that it's highly resistant to change, somewhat resistant to change. But the other 50% seem to think that, hey, there is openness to change. And some people have actually said we are highly open to change. So I think that's certainly very encouraging. So this is probably a good time, to actually talk about, in better user experience, better funder experience, better researcher experience, a lot of the things that you all talked about, in the context of the publishing world as well. But like I said, change isn't easy. There are a lot of blockers. So what are the blockers, you think? Why is it not easy to just say, hey, where's that magic wand? Let's wave it and make the changes. But what do you think are the blockers to actually implementing certain changes from your own experience, working in your institutions, right? So what are some of the blockers that you have seen when you proposed a change, or when you say, okay, why isn't moving as fast enough?
I'll start back with your last point, which is legacy systems and convoluted processes. There's too many systems, none of them connect that well to each other. And then also, if you've got 67 journals, there tends to be 67 different variations of those workflows. So a real blocker to change is everything being too complicated. We've got to simplify, and we don't necessarily need to standardize everything, but just to simplify everything so that things are more connected. So that's a big blocker, I think.
So another blocker I see is how we structure our journals. So the leadership in journals is often our late career or even retired professionals. And those are also often the most resistant to change. And so the struggle we have is year after year, we have new editors that are coming in that remember how things were when they were an author 15, 20 years ago and liked how it was, and struggle with change for where we are now. And so I really think we need to see younger and more diverse people leading our journals so that we have more perspectives.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of what you're saying. The difference between like a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? So like, and it points directly to how we deliver things in PDF format. So like, we deliver in PDF format, we're going to remain fixed through all time, and until we change that, we're stuck. And I think it comes back to the incentive system behind publishing and how we incentivize what we're doing and who the stakeholders are and who we want to center in that, right? So editors control our journals, they determine the scope and the shape, but really we're trying to focus on authors now. So there's a conflict there, there's a tension that you kind of have to balance as a publisher, and that is not an easy thing to do.
Some very, very great insights there. So when we polled the Whova audience, this is sort of what we got. So majority of the people thought there was an organizational resistance to change, that organizations weren't very keen on championing change. And of course, the second one was a limited technical capabilities. I think that's a lot of what you guys alluded to, is that you don't have systems that talk to each other. It's very difficult to pull out data. So just getting work done is hard. So how do you know, how can you change? Inflexible processes and workflows. I think this is something, again, when we were talking over the breakfast, you said, this journal, this is the way we have done it, and it has got like a 150-page style guide or process guide, and it's set in stone, and we're not going to go back and look at it. So I think there's that mindset of saying, okay, this is how we have done it always, and should we even question it? For the budget constraints and lack of resources, I think that's going to be there in every organization, in every industry, right? So, as much as we like to think that other industries have infinite cash flow, I think it's always going to be there. Those constraints are always going to remain. But I think, like you said, David, it comes down to that fixed mindset and the growth mindset. It's about talking about, okay, we need to change, and bringing in that sense of urgency and bringing in that sense of leadership and a vision. So we talked about why it is necessary to think about change, and how do we get started on that journey, right? So this is the Agile Transformation Roadmap that I think as we have in our own conversations with each other have discovered that this is sort of like the roadmap to empowering your team to think about change. I think it all starts with having a vision. I'm sure you will agree. So Gill, I think, because you and Kriyadocs have had the longest relationships, I'd like to hear from you about how, the BMJ's vision for, okay, we need to change what we've been doing a lot, kind of helped set you on the path of...
So I think a good vision to have is to almost have no vision, conversely, because sometimes we've talked about in the technical systems of having too prescriptive a roadmap ahead. You need to be in a position where you can adapt to change readily. And as we've discussed, I think the pandemic's actually helped. But users have gone from resistance to change to demanding change, and actually they want to do it too quickly. So I think the way to do it is It's keeping it simple and in small increments, and that's absolutely the key, because trying to have a vision that just outlines absolutely everything is not going to be right. So the vision has got to be keeping things simple and doing things with an open mind. So almost having no vision, if that makes sense.
I think that's a very interesting point. So actually be even agile with your vision is kind of what you're saying. Now, having the vision, you need to have leadership commitment that goes along with it. I think, Bryan, I know you have championed change within SPE. And I know you've been at the forefront. You've been very heavily involved in the transitions as well. So talk to us a little bit about why it was important for you to stay committed, and what were some of the initial challenges that you probably heard from the team that you had to move over.
Right. So I'm from the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and we have the unique issue that journals are not a profit center for the society. We actually make most of our money from events. And so, first of all, convincing people that it was worth spending time making changes in journals was hard enough, because they were okay with, well, we lose this much money, that's fine. But when I got down to, okay, our authors care about this, and these authors are our members, and a lot of our highly involved members are also our authors and our reviewers and editors. They care about these things, and so when I pushed to change production, that's what made the difference. Also, it's all going to come down to the money. So if you can find a way to save money or make more revenue and show how the change that you're going to make that's going to make a better deal for everyone is also going to make money or save money, that's going to matter to the higher ups.
Absolutely. I think the third step along this transformation roadmap is probably having a great deal of collaboration. And I think we talked a lot about, when you talked about the changes coming into the publishing industry, is lack of collaboration. So in order for any change to take root, there has to be a lot of collaboration, trust, and transparency. And I think establishing that visibility. And David, I'd like to hear from you. You've been fairly new to working with us, but I think you've championed this level of collaboration, and I think you're seeing the benefits of it. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about how you have championed collaboration, trust, transparency through metrics, through data.
Yeah, so collaboration obviously is about trust, and it's knowing that anyone you're working with has a point of view, right, and it's valued, and you have the courage to say, okay, I've been doing it this way for 20x years, right? But it's not written in stone. We can just toss a bomb and blow it up, and it's gonna break, and that's okay, because the people you're working with are going to help you get through that broken structure you have and create something better. And I think knowing that as long as you have a foundation of something that you can build off of, then as things break and need to be repaired, that's okay. And it doesn't have to be this kind of ego trip of, well, this broke, I told you it would break. So why did we even go down this path in the first place? Of course it's gonna break. Everything breaks all the time. Who cares? We'll print an erratum, right? Like, I think knowing that it's going to break and being able to move beyond that is really important.
I think you hit upon a very important aspect. Yes, Jill.
So I'm just going to say it's also about trust and challenging. So, if a user asks for something, you might say, no, you can't have that, or no, that can't be done. But you need to be challenged by suppliers as well, so that you can just keep things simple. It's not just about how can we do something, but why are you doing it in the first place? So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Constructive conflict, right, which always leads to growth. And so what it actually leads to is iteration and improvement. When you're able to make small changes, see the results of those small changes, that just sort of builds up that confidence. And I know that in our journey with BMJ, Jill, we've had a lot of very interesting examples where Malcolm from your team has come to us and said, hey, could we do it this way? Could we do it that way? And a lot of that sort of iteration and improvement.
He didn't throw bombs or grenades, by the way.
But yeah, so in our company, we had this, let's keep Malcolm happy as the goal, right? And only because he got it from the right perspective and we're asking for it. And there were small enough changes and improvements, and it sort of starts building on itself. But it's very interesting because it leads to this culture of continuous innovation. And I think, and I know Bryan, for instance, I know that there's a lot of collaboration back and forth, and we keep talking about what if, could we do it this way, could we do that, that way. And now it's starting to come from within the teams, and it's not just having to be like a top-down driven, because when you give that cultural safety for people to start innovating, innovation starts happening, and that's where the magic starts happening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and we've been working into being more of a culture of continuous improvement. Before I've been with my current company for about 2 years, and before very little changed from year to year, and it was very difficult. And so, you do have to prove some wins, because there's those I told you it was going to break, that are just waiting to see, like, look, you failed. That's why we didn't do that. See. And so you need some successes to point to and say, yeah, we made a change, and yes, it was messy, but here to look at, we are on the other side of it, and it worked. And that makes a big difference. But finding little things, and one of the things that I've loved working with Kriya is when I have a little thing that I want to fix, I don't get told, oh, well, the system just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. It's at the very least, it's let's look into it. Let's see, can we make this happen? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's fine. But it's like, we want to constantly improve our processes, and we're always seeing little things we can do to make our processes better.
Fabulous. And actually, this is my favorite slide of all, right? So when you kind of create this culture of continuous innovation, you get into what I like to call this as the agility continuum. You are able to deliver increased agility to the publishers by co-creation and collaboration. There's a lot of learning that we get as partners, as technology partners for publishers, as to how to improve processes, how to challenge status quo, and how to give back. Because what I learned from BMJ, we're able to share with SPE and share with ASM and so on. Mm-hmm. But then it also leads to improved author experience, because we are eventually working hand in hand to make sure that our authors are very happy, and they are increasingly getting more and more value. And that starts bringing in this brand loyalty. Your authors like working with you. You get repeat authors. Authors start referring other authors. You get increased submissions. And then there's mutual growth. You get more faster innovation and shared best practices, and you sort of create this ecosystem of collaboration and continuous improvement, which I think is a really interesting and a nice state to be in. It does require work to get to that kind of state, but I think it all starts with an amazing level of collaboration, trust, and transparency that we talked about. But again, what we've been talking about so far is very, fluffy. But I think unless I put some real interesting metrics and hard metrics out there, I'm sure none of you guys will believe that it's worth going through all that effort to actually changing. So let's go through some of the metrics that we have been able to, see. I think Gill, this is from the BMJ. I would like you to, talk about the changes that we've been able to get.
Okay, so as you were saying, it's really good to have a little thing to focus on,
Right.
and so that you can prove to users, okay, well, that bit didn't work, but hey, I've improved this production metric, for example. BMJ did a project, it was with the production team, and that was working just in the whole end-to-end, just focusing on the production process. And there was a real focus on KPIs, and not so much how we get there, but how can we reduce the production time from X amount of days to this amount of days. And that real focus really helped with the users, and that's just continued. We've kind of created monsters, because the users are no longer resistant to change. They want change, they demand change. So they've seen that with a little bit of effort, their production time can be, a couple of days can be shaved off. And now they keep wanting to do it. At the end of it, we'll have published
Instantly
it before we've
published,
received it.
Yep. And I think, the volume that went up, that's been going up for the BMJ over the last few years, twice the amount of volume that we first started off with, but not at twice the amount of people that had to be hired to handle that. I think that's been the biggest takeaways, is that you've been able to seamlessly scale, because you're always optimizing, you're always trying to find something, improve, and so it leads to that. And I think a very important thing to point out is when the COVID surge happened, there were a lot of articles that were getting published and had to be published within a small turnaround time. The team innovated. The team came up with ways in which you could handle that surge. You could identify these COVID articles by putting these labels, by putting these metadata on it, and they worked together to make sure that we hit the necessary turnaround time. And so it was really fascinating to see that when you create that culture of innovation, that the solutions start coming in. But again, I think placing authors at the heart of this journey has always been important for us, both BMG and for Kriyadocs. And so it was very important to make sure that we are not upsetting the authors by doing a lot of these changes, but some of the feedback that we've got from the authors have been phenomenal. And that again is like you said, Bryan, is like getting those smaller wins, is that this is encouraging, this is ensuring that we are giving us that validation that we are on the right path, and kind of starting to work on that a little bit more. This is from the SPE. The Bryan, would you like to talk about the turnaround time benefits that you have gotten?
Sure. Yeah. So when I was hired, I was told figure out production because it's taking way too long. And I agree. It was over 12 weeks, which is far too long for production. And a lot of that was inefficiencies in our workflow, some perspectives about how many times a paper needed to be looked at before it was published, expectations of perfection that really didn't need to be there. And so I set a clear goal with Kriya and said we need to be under 5 weeks. Honestly, expecting we probably wouldn't be able to do that, but because I didn't expect our authors to catch on with that and actually want to go faster. But once we gave them a better system, they were working faster too, and so we're under 4 weeks now, which is below our goal, which is great, and our authors are much happier.
That's fantastic. And I think, these are changes that happen organically without it being like forced upon on anybody. I think it's just providing the necessary systems, the ease of use, the data to back up, and the team kind of just solves the problem. I think that's the fantastic part of it. Why is being agile important for publishers? I think the last few comments from our panelists here. I think we're running out of time here, so I wanted to make sure that we have a little bit of time to talk. But yeah, why do you think it's important to be agile?
So I'll share. It gives you bandwidth and efficiency. So I'm sure many of you have the same issue where we're being told to do more, but no, you can't have any more hires. You need to figure it out. So how are you going to do that? And putting an agile workflow in allows the people you have who are working for you to do more. And that's made a big difference. So, we've actually been able to downsize a little bit in what we were doing because we had to, and yet we're moving faster than we ever were.
I'd say the important thing about being agile is small iterations, because change management can be really hard. If you change a whole big system, it's really difficult for the users. So lots of small changes, and those small changes means that you don't overcomplicate it or over-design or over-engineer. And it also means that you should come up with small changes that are simple and intuitive for the user. So actually change management almost is not a thing. So I think agile is the only way you can do that.
Absolutely. David?
I really like new things, and I like implementing new things. And if you are not able to view things as small change quickly, you just can't implement anything new. And so in order to implement anything new, I think you have to embrace this mindset, or else you're just stuck.
Yeah, some interesting insights. I'm just going to run this video and hoping.
Gunter Eisenbach, the founder and CEO of JMIR Publications, is fond of speaking in terms of disruption, the disruption of scholarly publishing related to peer review, open access funding, the development of overlay journals, of leveraging technology to empower authors, editors, readers, and to support publishing initiatives. And I believe that disruption and agility in publishing are true partners in this case. They enable and support each other. Without agility, for example, we wouldn't have succeeded in creating JMER-X Med, the first overlay journal to be indexed in PubMed. With its multiple pathways for submission, peer review, and publication, this initiative required extensive iteration, not only in its conceptual development, but in the various technologies it leverages to succeed. Without embracing agility, we wouldn't be working with partners like Kriyadocs now in order to establish and continuously improve new production workflows and platforms that meet the ever-changing and complex demands of STM scholarly publishing. Let's take two further examples briefly, metadata and accessibility, and consider what it would take for a publisher to address the requirements of each. Do you think you would have said the exact same thing 5 years ago or 1 year ago? Do you think your answer will change in another 5 years or even in another year? Will you reinvent, or will you want to reinvent the wheel each time there's a change to your answer? Of course not. Wherever possible, you'll want to build on what you have. And where that's not possible, you'll seek out better and more flexible solutions. Being able to do so sustainably and efficiently, that's agility. It's essential that we as publishers work together with the right people, the right technologies, and the right partners in order to bring innovative and agile thinking into daily practice. Why? Because if we believe, as I do, that scholarly publishing is vital for the welfare of everyone without exception, then we must rise to the challenge of finding the best and most flexible approaches to advance and provide access to all research more effectively, more efficiently, and more widely.
That was Richard from JMIR sharing his viewpoints. And what is your vision for the future of agile publishing? Gill, so what do you envision?
So I would envisage research more accessible and more usable. So I would envisage it more about being communities, not just about such disparate communities at the moment, researchers, users. Everyone should be brought together. So I envisage it more being joined up.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. David, your final comments on what do you see as your vision for the future of agile publishing?
Yes. I can't say it better than that, honestly. It's about communities. So societies are just become a representation of a community that's together.
Honestly, yeah, I think what you've said answers what I've said. I know we're getting close to time, so I'll be done there. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think any questions from the audience? On this worksheet you have, there are blocks where you can take notes and share your comments, but this is an interesting worksheet. This is for you to go back to your own organizations and brainstorm with your team on how you could come up with the vision, the leadership commitment, the collaboration, trust and transparency, iterative improvements, and then enter into this mold of continuous innovation. So this is something that you could take away and write your comments on it and use it for as an interesting takeaway from the audience, from the panelists here today. Thank you so much. Any questions, any comments or anything that you guys would like to share? Okay, all right, thank you.